Welcome everyone. Nice to have you in our last session of the week of Connect University Autumn School on secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. I'm Alex. I was your host for the entire week. And as always, as well as today, merely warming everyone up for our main topics with speakers from inside the EU Commission to give you more of a broad input on the topic of secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. We started back in 2015 with Connect University, which is the knowledge sharing flagship initiative of DigiConnect, which aims to update both EU staff and the general public about the latest digital trends, as well as important digital policies. The scope of our sessions in general is to put at the same digital table EU institutions, industry, academia, and international organizations, helping us find inspiration from one another, as well as identify current opportunities and threats to digital policymaking. For those of you who are not yet connected via Sly.do, we invite you to do so using the code Global Digital Infrastructure. I say this because over there you can ask us questions and we'll make sure that they make their way towards the speakers. Also, in case you want to share any insights on social media of the week as well as today, we encourage everyone to use the hashtag ConnectUniversity as well as digital infrastructures. The recordings of our sessions will be available as of next week, and you can find them on the Digital EU channel on YouTube, as well as on our community dedicated to Connect University on Futurium. We invite everyone to join Futurium because it's the place where we have discussions around everything which is digital, and it's the place where we also take inspiration for future sessions as well, as we see what's important for you. Generally speaking, technology moves pretty fast, so we must run alongside with it, having access to the most up-to-date information so we can reach our destinations in good shape. Before we start the core session of today, I want to mention two future destinations of Connect University, which is our session on cybersecurity and resilience, the Ukraine experience, which will happen on the 25th of October, as well on the project on iPeak on 7 December. Now then, the session of today will recap the most important takeaways of the week, will give us a more holistic view of the autumn school topics and their relation to policy. As well, we will end on the Commission's plan and concerns for the future in terms of greening digital infrastructures. Thus, for both non-experts, such as I, as well as for those of you who are more fluent in the matter, we have with us today Thomas Skordas, Deputy Director General of DigiConnect, Carlota Reiners Fontana, Head of Unit Electronic Communications Policy, as well as Antonella Marino, Policy Officer in Unit Markets, and Ilias Yakovidis, our advisor for the digital aspects of green transformation. So without further ado, Thomas, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander, and good afternoon to all. First of all, let me say it's a real pleasure to be here in this last session of a very important topic that you have seen all over the week, the story of secure and sustainable digital infrastructures, one of our cornerstones of investment and of policy making in DigiConnect in the European Commission, and one of the cornerstones, I would say more broadly, of the strategy that our Commissioner, Mr. Breton, is promoting for Europe. Nothing can be done in digital and nothing can be done in going ahead with the kind of society we want if we do not have the underlying digital infrastructures that are absolutely essential for our further economic development and for our society in general. I think all along this week, you had the opportunity to see why digital infrastructures are so important and what are these digital infrastructures and what we are doing all together, actually, both from the policy perspective, but also from a societal and a business perspective in the different parts that we are developing in Europe, in the member states, in terms of digital infrastructures. So we started the week last Monday with the first session that was addressing the challenges of a sustainable digital infrastructure. This session was hosted by Thibaut Kleiner, who is one of our directors for policy strategy and outreach in DG Connect, the European Commission. And it was an opportunity somehow to provide a kind of the underlying principles that we consider in developing these digital infrastructures, which are an essential part of our digital decade policy program, the program that is driving us somehow all our investments from now to 2030 with all the member states. So when I say the underlying principles and values that guide these development policies of digital transformation, we had therefore the chance to mention some of the rights that we wish to protect and to adhere to, and to make sure that we keep people at the center of all our developments, at the center of all our actions. I think this is a key issue and a key difference in our approaches that we see in other parts of the world, whether these are called the United States, China, or others. We had indeed the chance there to give you an overview in this first session about the 2030 digital decade, so this policy program that I mentioned, and then to go a little bit and to look closer to the kinds of digital infrastructure targets that we have set up in this digital decade policy program, and focus then on some of those, for example, in 4 areas like the gigabit connectivity, like the chips, the edge nodes for data processing, and the quantum computers. So that is what we have tried to present to you in this first session of the Connect University. In the afternoon of Monday, in the second session, we had the chance really to focus on the challenges of the gigabit society, the gigabit coverage by land, sea, and air. So this was hosted by Ms. Rita Wesenbeck, who was our director in DG Connect responsible for connectivity. And here you could see that these gigabit society targets that we have in digital policy program are certainly related to the effort that we are doing to make sure that gigabit networks are deployed all over Europe, both in, of course, and that we aim at 100% coverage of those networks by the end of the decade. We have also had the chance to give you the visibility on the need to invest on 3 different types of networks. One is, of course, everything which is related to the ground segments, the kind of fiber optics and other networks that we have to deploy all over Europe, and they are ongoing, of course. Then, and to this, of course, we have also the 5G elements, which is a very important target for the whole Europe. A second big area of activity is related to undersea cabling, and you see now with all the discussion that is taking place in the context of the world that we live, how important this kind of undersea cabling is, not only for Europe, but also for connecting Europe with the rest of the world. And finally, the satellite technology, which comes to complement the investments we are doing in the other 2 types of technology, and where we have ambitious programs in place until the end of the decade. So then we moved Tuesday. The first session of Tuesday was targeting more on our strategy on microchips and our, I would say, Chips Act, and in particular, focusing, of course, on the kind of investments we need to make Europe as sovereign as possible, while, of course, cooperating with like-minded countries to make sure that the ecosystem, the very, very interconnected ecosystem that we have in semiconductors is well functioning. And we could see what happened during the pandemic, which is a very, very good I would say, lesson that we have all learned, which was a stimulus for our policy in this field. The session was hosted by Ms. Lucilla Scioli, who is our Director for Artificial Intelligence and Digital Strategy. And we had here the chance to have speakers who were coming from a chip manufacturer perspective, but also from an end user perspective, from the healthcare sector, and who highlighted not only the importance of chips for the economy and society, but we have highlighted also why is Europe, why it is so important for Europe to massively invest in this field. Then we moved into another session, the fourth session of the whole of the Connect University. The fourth session took place Wednesday morning, and this time it was dedicated to the shift that we are observing from the cloud infrastructure to the edge infrastructures. So this session was hosted by Pierre Sastanet, who is our head of unit in DigiConnect for cloud and software. And it was really the opportunity to tell you what this major shift entails, and we will see in the next years coming. So far, you know very well what is the cloud and the cloud strategy and the cloud, I would say, services that are provided notably by hyperscalers. But as the model, we are now entering into a new model where from the cloud service we have seen so far, which were 100% of what we had, we will be moving into a new computing paradigm, as we say, which is the edge paradigm. And where we expect that the present model of 100%, actually it's more 80% cloud services and 20% edge services, would exactly reverse to become edge services 80%, cloud services 20% in the years to come. So we had the opportunity to inform you and to give you with our participants, with our speakers, what are the points of view in this kind of major transition we're already living, the points of view of the cloud, the point of view of the telecom, and the point of view of the IT industry, and how they are offering complementary services and how they are competing out there in the market. So you could hear, for example, from Ericsson and Telecom Italia, their approach from the point of view of the edge computing services. You could hear from Siemens what they are developing, not only for manufacturing and for factory automation, and you could see from Capgemini what is the role today of a modern system integrator in these areas, and who have been providing to you what are the main requirements for end-to-end solutions and value-added services for the edge adoption. Then Wednesday afternoon, we moved to present to you the approach or the state of play in the data centers. As you know, these data centers are extremely important for the functioning, not only of the cloud, but for the functioning of everything which is public and private services. And many of the things you receive are now possible because of these data computing centers that are found themselves all over the world. And here we gave some concrete examples with the colleagues from Digit, so about the data centers approach that we have in the European Commission. By the way, I forgot to mention that this session was hosted by Manuel Mateo Guaye, who is our Deputy Head of Unit in DigiConnect, in the unit dealing with cloud and services. And then we had the opportunity to have some partners from data center alliances and from data center environmental associations. We gave you the different perspectives about how we can engage to achieve a social contract in the operation of these data centers who consume more and more energy, and therefore their transition to become green data centers is a huge challenge. And they gave you also feedback on the techniques for data infrastructure and cloud operators that infrastructure and cloud operators are deploying out there, and what is the effect of new data processing at the edge, which is also necessary when we deploy edge. It's necessary to have mini data centers and like the ones I mentioned before. And we had also the opportunity to give you what are the general policies that their commission is putting in place towards the greening targets of these data centers. Then we enter Thursday, then we enter, Wednesday afternoon, session 6, where we have focused on the issue of the next generation internet. This session was hosted by Gemma Carolillo, who is our acting head of unit in next generation internet, still in DigiConnect. So we have tried somehow to show to you what this future internet means and what it means to develop a future internet and its underlying technologies that they are centered on the people. So this is essential, especially when we're trying to understand how we move from the present, I would say, technologies and internet that we have out there to what we would call the Web3 and what would be the challenges out there, and which of course are somehow related to what you see now going on internationally, but also in Europe in terms of the metaverse. So the future internet is certainly one of the big components in shaping this metaverse, new world spaces that would be emerging that are already emerging and will be taking even more concrete shape in the years to come. Then I move to Thursday and session 7. This was a bit, I would say, the kind of technological infrastructures that we are developing in Europe in the area of high-performance computing and quantum technologies. This session has been hosted by Oscar Diez and Juan Pellegrin, who are our two prominent, I would say, colleagues responsible for, respectively, for high-performance computing and quantum technologies in one of DigiConnect units of the same name. Here we had the chance to present you the infrastructures, the supercomputing infrastructures we are building together with all the member states in different parts of Europe. So we had the chance to present to you what we call a petascale supercomputer. These are supercomputers that provide some tens of millions of billion operations per second, which are absolutely essential for our many scientific and industrial applications. Actually, supercomputers are at the origin of many of the discoveries we have and many of the applications we have in more than 800 scientific and industrial application areas, from drugs and new materials to understanding the climate change and to understanding actually chemical reactions and the way we can build, for example, future batteries. So we presented to you the case of Meluxina, one of our supercomputers, petascale supercomputers that we installed recently in Luxembourg, and it's operating there. And we presented to you one of the top 3 world supercomputers that we have recently inaugurated in Kajaani in Finland, which is called LUMI, and pre-exascale is the present state of the art. We are heading towards the exascale, which is 1 billion calculations per second, which would be our new target for acquiring machines of this order in the next 1 or 2 years. And finally, we had the chance also to give you a little bit a perspective of what we do in quantum computers and quantum technologies more broadly, and how we see somehow the interaction, but also the interoperation between supercomputing, high-performance supercomputers, and cloud computers. And we explained to you that one of our big targets is to make sure that we have European quantum computers that are interconnected with our network of high-performance supercomputers. And this is already what we will announce very early next week as one of our next big investment targets. So this was session 7 on Thursday. Then in then we had the chance on Thursday afternoon to have an 8th session where we presented the industrial platform economy to spare innovation. This was hosted by Max Lemke, who is our head of unit on the Internet of Things. And we've presented to you what is why platform economy is so vital for European industry and is attractive for our citizens. We had the chance to present you examples, concrete examples of digital platforms which are promoting the development of new types of businesses and give rise to an innovative app economy to scale. And we had representative examples actually of data spaces that we are developing in the European Union in manufacturing, in agriculture, in mobility, and in energy, which we are promoting under the Digital Europe program. Actually, I think we address the issues of mobility, of automotive, of energy, and of farming, where we gave you concrete examples of what we do in this field. And then it was this morning, the 9th session, where we focused more on the transition from first generation mobile technologies to the 5th generation technology that we have right now. And this session was hosted by Peter Stockman, who is our head of unit, still in DigiConnect, dealing with future connectivity systems. So we have explained to you why 5G technology is a real game changer when compared to the previous generations, mobile generations, and how much 5G is now enabling the digital transformation of our industry, but also of our society and of our public services. The move to the gigabit speeds is absolutely essential, as well as the move to low latency networks, almost real-time reactions, and to the development of new types of applications connecting objects, devices, the Internet of Things, but also the principles that are behind software-defined network visualization elements that allow new innovative business models across multiple sectors. And here we are. So we are in this session now, which is the last session after a long and I hope very fruitful and very educational, I would say, week for all of you in these digital infrastructures. I think the week made it possible to show to you why it is so important for Europe to be in this game of investing massively in digital infrastructures, the kind of digital and green infrastructures that you have seen all along the week. Actually, I would say that the COVID-19 crisis showed to us in a very, very prominent way how much we are exposed into vulnerabilities of our digital space, and they even had revealed to us that in many areas we had insufficient investments in infrastructure development. So the fact that you have seen that we have developed the Digital Decade Policy Program is exactly stimulated by the experiences we lived the last 2-3 years. To give you an idea about our critical dependencies, when we talk about AI today, when we talk about cloud, when we talk about big data, when we talk about the semiconductor industry, when we talk about the underlying processors, these are infrastructure elements on which Europe's dependence is very, very high. And we do now agree that with all member states that it's absolutely the time to massively invest in all these new infrastructures, most of which we have had the pleasure to present to you during the week. At the same time, we see that these infrastructures would need massive investments. So does Europe have the necessary, I would say, financial means to cope with competition on these kinds of very advanced infrastructures and deploy these advanced infrastructures over its territory and over its space? I would say yes, because the colleagues here and us from the management worked very, very closely with all the member states to be able to make sure, for example, that in their recovery and resilience plans, that they are massively investing in developing exactly these kinds of infrastructures, as well as the other targets that we have put in the Digital Decade program. So as you know very, very well, in the Next Generation EU, which is a program of almost 1 trillion euros, there is more than 20% of targets that are really on digital. And to our knowledge, this target has been overpassed, since we are now in some member states even at 40% of investments of their national plans. In some others, we're closer to the target, but overall, the average is very positive, since we are more close to 25% for all the member states than to the 20% that we have targeted. And when you combine digital and green, I think you have all the elements to be able to put in place in the next 4 years what we need to achieve. Now, let me come back, however, to a number of these infrastructures, and I will close with that. It's important not only to understand that, you have already heard about semiconductors, you have already heard about a number of other infrastructures. So I would like to give you a little bit, a couple of other thoughts. I'm not sure that these have been addressed during the sessions, but nevertheless, I believe it's a valuable input from my side, a little bit to address some address with you some other angles of these infrastructure investments. Take the semiconductor industry. So it's very clear now that the semiconductors power everything from smartphones to ballistic missiles. And they have basically been driven by the ingenuity of the chip designers and the dynamism of the market. So today we are at a market of almost €500 billion, so €500 billion, sorry. By the end of the decade, it will be €1 trillion. So our dependence on Taiwan first, and our dependence on some other parts of the world is very, very big, as you know. The big challenge for all the modern countries, for all the developed states, is to massively invest to get some of these fundamental infrastructures that really power our economy and society to invest in their own territory. Today, the announcement from China, from the EU, from the US, from Japan and other countries is going above €200 billion for the years to come. And of course, in this kind of situation, all will depend also on the next geopolitical context. It's not by chance that the president of Taiwan has recently declared that her country, her island actually, is well protected by a silicon shield. Time will show, but time also shows that we need to invest ourselves, and this is why we put in place this ambitious CHIPS Act. But at the same time, we need to cooperate and to coordinate and synchronize our activities with all our like-minded countries so as not to see ourselves again being caught by surprise in a kind of geopolitical situation that might come or might hopefully not come. So that's, for example, just to stress the importance of semiconductors. Since, by the way, we're talking about shields, another shield that we are developing in Europe is a cybersecurity shield. This was one of the most important developments that we have announced a couple of years ago with our cybersecurity strategy. And here we are building the future shield, cybersecurity shield for Europe, which would come from massive investments in the next few years on what we call security operating centers that would be monitoring our networks, both public and private, and that will be interconnected also to be able to share what's going out there in terms of threats and in terms of intelligence, and connected to AI and to high-performance computing would allow us to prevent and to protect ourselves from future surprises, from threats. So this is another element of why it's so important to invest massively in these kinds of infrastructures. And you see again the impact of war, the importance of having these kinds of cybersecurity shields developed in Europe, and which, by the way, do not only address the ground, but also address the space. And that's why we have announced, and we are about now to conclude in the Council and in the Parliament, a secure connectivity initiative, which would be another major investment for 3-4 billion euros. Actually, it might even go up to 6 billion euros to create another possibility for Europe to protect itself from what is going on in this kind of risk-based approach we have been entering. I would conclude by saying that our approach about infrastructures would not be complete if we do not also invest on an infrastructure which is securely accessed by our citizens. This is the major issue which is linked to identity management, and this is where we have proposed very recently in Europe a new approach, a new legislation, which is based on national digital identities and which we called the digital wallet. So that would mean that you would have access to very precious public services, but also private services, by using this EID wallet approach, which we hope will be accepted soon by Council and Parliament. And we have already started developing through our Digital Europe program very innovative applications that are based on this digital wallet, which would allow the federation of national identities and the development also of very ambitious applications that would be commonplace, hopefully, in a few years from now. I think this is all what I wanted to share with you in the beginning of this session, and I would leave now the floor to Alexander and the colleagues for the continuation of this last session on Connect University. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you indeed, not only for the overview of what happened this week and giving your insights in the most important matters, but as well and also on future developments. And I think for some of those future developments, we are actually also preparing Connect University sessions on. So it's good to see that we are in line on this case. We thank you again for your contribution and insights. So then if there are some questions, but I'm not sure if time allows for it. So then we will pass the floor to Ms. Carlota Reiners. Carlota?
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. I hope you can see me. It's a pleasure to be here. Alexandru, thank you for all these invitations and to follow Mr. Korda's presentation in the closing of this session, a very intense week, I understand. So I will be presenting to you all the Digital Decade Program. Let me just first make sure that, sorry, you can see it. Just a moment, please. It's very slow. And then sorry, can you see it? I think
Not yet.
Sorry, just let me share first. Voilà. Okay, excellent. I think now it works, I hope. So
Yes,
let me start. Okay, thank you. Sorry for this glitch. Voila, so that's what I will be presenting to you, the Digital Decade Program, Policy Program for 2030. It's a very broad program. I think Thomas has also addressed it, and with which we worked very intensively with an extremely good team of colleagues throughout this year and the past. Now let us see if this, no, that doesn't work. Sorry, cannot. Wait. Sorry, I have problems just to move. Voila, can you see the next slide?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, so voila, this is the essence of the Digital Decade Program in a nutshell. It's a policy program which is cross-cutting between all what has to do with putting in place all the digital technologies and infrastructures that will be needed in the next digital decade for the digital economy to flourish, the companies to function, the end users to interact, etc. Together with the very varied set of rules, the European rules, the European way of doing things and the values that we have. So rules which will come across in several areas that you can see, from artificial intelligence to media freedom, going through cybersecurity, etc. And last, I mentioned indeed already the values, so the democracy values that we have in the EU, where people are at the center with inclusion, with safety, with sustainability, etc. So the digital decade strategy, so to say, came in two parts. First, there was Digital Decade Compass Communication, which was issued last year in March. And then we prepared a policy program which was presented in September and then finally negotiated in the last summer. And I will explain in the next slides how all this how we presented it and the context. So first, the political context in which we were back in, I think, November 2020, starting to have these discussions in preparation of a communication that came out in March 2021. Well, these are, so to say, the 5 realities that we are facing in Europe, companies, end users, governments, and it's also, by the way, not only in Europe, but which created a bit the context of this program. A geopolitical reality where we are more and more aware and of the need for ensuring resilience and greater sovereignty for the benefit of the people and the businesses. A technological reality where we are post-COVID times, where we realized how important connectivity infrastructure was and the services in order to stay connected, to do business, to learn, to work, etc. And now a reality which just keeps transforming and changing, and we are probably facing now in the years to come a big revolution with the upcoming of the metaverse and of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and all these transformations. And therefore we need to embrace the acceleration actually of this digital transformation, and we need to make sure that the companies and the people and the administrations are ready for that. There is a climate change reality, as we all know, and the two go very much in pair, ICT and climate. We need to ensure that the ICT contributes to reducing the global footprint. The ICT itself has to become greener. I think you will hear a bit more later today, and also has to help other sectors to become greener. So that's another reality. A societal reality where we still face a lot of divides between people, between geographies, in terms of skills, etc. And we need much more trust in the digital environment as we are moving our lives more and more into the digital environment. And finally, an economic reality. So an economic reality which now even more recently is even getting more and more difficult for people, for businesses, and where we need to try to leverage the benefits and the best of the digital transformations. So what were our goals when we set out the Digital Decade Compass? What we were trying to achieve? And I have alluded to some of these terms before. First, to bridge the existing divides in Europe, which are, as I said, geography between the urban areas and the rural areas, which are still not having the connectivity they need, but also the people are potentially not with the proper skills. The administrations are not fully digitized, etc. So we need to try to address that divide, but also the divide between businesses, in the different businesses, the SMEs, the big companies, to always leverage the digital potential. We need then also, of course, to look more at the citizens and how the digital will create opportunities for everyone and a better way to live and to interact while not leaving anyone behind. Of course, contributing to the climate neutral, circular and resilient economy. And last, to ensure that digital becomes an enabler of rights, freedoms, new sources of prosperity, which can be to the benefit of all. So in this context, as I said, there were a series of different documents. At first, the Commission adopted the Digital Compass communication in March 2021, where it did set out its vision. The vision for 2030 of a human-centered, sustainable and inclusive digital society and economy, digital transformation. And there is set out also the main cardinal points around which we would work and the targets. I'll speak about it later, and the way to get there. Then we took action. And we came with the Digital Decade Policy Program, is what you see basically in the blue box below, together also with a declaration on digital rights and principles. So the declaration will be an European declaration co-signed by the Commission, the European Parliament and the Council, setting out a series of rights and principles, which are actually many already enshrined in law today, in European law, but also some principles that we all commonly share. And it's about solidarity, inclusion, freedom of choice, privacy, etc. And then the program, much more operational, set out quite of a long list of objectives with the targets where we want Europe to be by 2030. And these targets are very critical, but in themselves are not enough. And there is a need to accompany with that investment. There are a lot of investment needs, and we need much more cooperation within Europe, between the member states, with the Commission, with businesses, with companies, etc. And then the program sets out a governance, meaning a way how member states together and with the Commission will be taking stock of the progress towards the achievement of these targets, which are for 2030, with a cycle of an annual cycle where also the Commission will set out every year the state of the digital decade. So this is in a nutshell what the program has set out, and now I will just try to present you every element. So the digital rights and principles, it's around 6 main topics, which, as you can see, coincide or match the goals that we had and the objectives that we had when issuing this project. And the aim really, or the background, was also to make sure that in a way businesses, companies, people can enjoy the same rights and principles in the digital life and in the digital world that they have in their daily real life, so to say. I will not go much more into the details, since I understand this was also covered in a session on Monday. But you will then be able to see how it matches sometimes the aspects of the program. Now, coming to the Digital Decade program, as I said, it does set out some common objectives to achieve. So it's beyond the goals that we had set out. Now we have very clear established objectives, and it's the first time that the 3 institutions agree on these objectives, and that they commit together with the member states to achieve whatever action they would take would be aiming at achieving these objectives. And they are around 5 topics: people, sustainability, power and leadership, society, and enterprises. Okay, and as you can see, people at the first, because it's about endorsing a human-centered digital environment which one can trust, which is secure, which respects rights like privacy, which will promote people's development, which will ensure that people feel included, which will ensure participation, etc. So that's a very important aspect, because up to now, potentially technology was not always being addressed or looked or approached also with a very human-centered approach. Sustainability, obviously, broad objective. Power and leadership. After all, this program and the vision for the digital decade by 2030 is about ensuring that companies, businesses, people and governments and administrations get empowered. And therefore is about elements such as sovereignty and security and capacity, etc. The objectives regarding society are very much linked to the values, of course, and about ensuring also the inclusiveness, so accessibility to public services, healthcare services, etc. And finally, for the enterprises, to ensure we promote their competitiveness. And there we touch upon many different areas. So from the importance of data and how data-intensive businesses, to research and innovation, obviously, to supporting SMEs to compete fairly along the very big global value chains. But SMEs are an essential asset of Europe that we absolutely want to support and to preserve, of course. Then we have the targets. As I said, these targets were set out in the communication. What is extremely important is that now they have been sort of rubber stamped in this digital program, which is, as we call it, hard legislation, and where member states, Commission, and the other institutions commit to achieve those targets. I'm sure you know there are around 4 cardinal points. The skills, so that's about the people and how equipped they are with digital technologies or to use digital technologies. It's about infrastructures, from the underlying infrastructure, the connectivity, fiber, 5G, to edge and cloud, to computing, to semiconductors, etc. I think you've heard a lot about this during this week. Last, for the businesses, is to ensure high take-up of technologies by the companies. It's very important to help companies to migrate and to move to use more technologies such as cloud, AI, or big data. It's about supporting innovators, and it's also about, as I said, ensuring that SMEs get the digital. And last but not least, because extremely important, is about the governments and the administrations. So ensure that people can have access to public services online. It's ensure that people can have access to their online e-health records and also digital identity. So ensuring that people can access all elements regarding their identity online. So as I said, the targets are not in itself sufficient. There needs to be a lot of efforts. A few words on the base of the targets very quickly. These are explained in a staff working document which accompanied the proposal. These targets and our monitoring, I will explain later, will rely on the Digital Economy Society Index, the DESI, that we have been publishing every year since very long. They are at the same time consistent and measurable. I mean, many of them, the majority of them, we have for the majority of them already well-established KPIs. And for some, they will be established new, but and they are stable because that's important to measure progress, but they can be also adaptable. And then what we also have seen when we were setting this out is that actually Europe is increasingly depending on other regions, and therefore sometimes for some key digital capacities, we need to take into account also that situation, for instance, for computing system or data infrastructure. And finally, as I said, they are aiming at addressing the societal needs in Europe. The governance. The governance is the mechanism that has been put in place that will allow us to monitor progress and which will be based on a very intense cooperation mechanism. And it's not science fiction, but it's nevertheless the first time that there is such a novel cooperative process put in place, at least in the digital area, in order to measure the progress towards the objectives, the targets, and it will be based on EU trajectory. So we are defining the trajectory for each of the targets from today to 2030 to ensure that every year we can measure progress relative to the trajectory. And then member states will also have their own national trajectories. We will be issuing a report every year, the State of the Union report, that will also be addressed to the European Council and Parliament, where we will give a picture of the progress towards these goals. And then we would also be signaling the need for intervention, for stepping in case of deviation. And except for the first year report, the report will actually be the result of a very intense cooperation process with the member states throughout the year. So looking at the results of a certain year, report of year 2023, we will sit with them, we will look at the progress, we will discuss what possible action measures, policies, etc., and then they will propose how to act, and we will explain this in the report. Sorry, next. So as I said, this will be based on a set of elements. Let me go relatively quickly on this slide, and also I need to look at it on my computer on the side. So first we have measurements, so the KPIs and the projected trajectories. So we will define these KPIs in law, in an implementing act. They will be, on the basis of this, we will define the trajectories at EU level. We will discuss them with member states, and they will have a picture where we expect progress at union level to go for each target from now to 2030. And then they will have to develop their own. We will also issue guidance to the member states how to define what we call national roadmaps, because we would be expecting them to issue a national roadmap which will set out their proposal, how to address each target, what measures to take, what investments to put, what resources to use in order to address each target. And on the basis of which they will be able to develop their national trajectories. And then, as I said, they will then prepare on the basis of this their roadmaps, where they have to tell us what are the measures that either they have put in place or they plan to put in place, the timing, the resources, etc. I think I have mentioned already. So besides a lot of cooperation and looking together how to address deficiencies or deviations from the targets, from the trajectories, it will also be about implementing obligations and tasks. And the Commission will then make its assessment in the yearly report, and it will have obviously to take account of the different capacities of the member states, the different starting points for each target, for each member state to contribute to those targets. And this is also very important when looking at all this progress, we will also look at take into account the principles and the rights that have been laid down in the declaration. But it's not only about cooperating with the member states and but also with the private and public stakeholders. Because obviously these targets are to the benefit of businesses, companies, end users, citizens, etc. So we also, both us and the Commission, us and the member states must ensure that there is proper consultation with private and public stakeholders so that the roadmaps reflect what is the state in the member state at the moment and what they are planning for the years to come. This is a particular aspect and moment of the governance. It's the so-called structured dialogue, and this was actually very important during the negotiations with Council and Parliament, because besides setting out the picture in the report every year, besides discussing with the member states how to best address and ensure they address the targets, and then ask them to tell us what are the measures they're going to put in place, in case there can be situations where there is a problem, where there is a significant deviation, and where we see we are not going to get there, and then we need to really sit and discuss. So we have put in place a mechanism for a structured dialogue with the member states, where we will also look at the concrete evidence, and the idea is for the Commission to guide and support the member states to identify which adjustments need to be made, and actually to come together to some agreed conclusions so that there is a clear action, so to say, to follow up by the member states concerned. And we will, of course, inform of these conclusions to the Parliament and the Council. This is very important because here we are a bit combining a mechanism which is fully based on cooperation, but at the same time, and it will continue, as I said, but at some point one needs to sit and discuss more in detail if there is really a problem. And the idea is not to do a top-down approach where the Commission sort of goes against the member states, but rather come together to these agreed conclusions and make sure that there is action afterwards, because that's the most important, is that the targets are addressed. For all these cooperation mechanisms and for discussing, we are setting a new expert group that will be called the Digital Decade Board, that will be composed of member states representatives at a relatively high level, which are able to address and cover all the elements and all the aspects of the digital program, and which will be consulted on any matter which has to do with Union's progress towards the digital transformation in general. This board will be able to issue reports, opinions, recommendations that then the Commission will take into account when preparing its annual report, but also member states and stakeholders can look at it. And the board will also assist the Commission when defining our priorities, our principles in the area of multi-country projects. It's an element that I will just come now to discuss. Maybe I'm going to accelerate a little bit. On multi-country projects, what is this? So this is a mechanism to pool investments in order to be able to invest in critical areas, investments that a member state alone cannot make or doesn't have the same impact, and therefore there is a need to pool investments by several member states, by all member states, with or without the Commission. So these multi-country projects are large-scale projects for the achievement of the targets. They pool also potentially private resources on top of public, and they could cover investments in all the areas that you can see, which, as you can see, are critical technology the technologies to support, to mention, for instance, blockchain, quantum infrastructure, high performance computing, but also things like digital public administration. So these are the areas which will be looked at and which could also eventually expand in the future. And with this, indeed, I come to the end of my presentation. And we have also a Futurium platform where there is a lot of exchanges. And by the way, a lot of webinars and presentations. So I'll invite you to check there. And actually, there is one on the 4th of October, data sovereignty. Alexandra, over to you.
Gladys, thank you, Carlota. Indeed, I think it's always good to see roadmaps. I think it puts all of us more at ease. And also great to see the invitation for Futurium as well. We invited everyone as well at the beginning of the session. So yes, please, everyone which is in the area, I think your input is needed over there personally as well. Do you have time to take some questions, Carlota?
Yeah.
There are some, let's say, more general ones and more rather specific. Maybe one more general one. Let's see. Because you mentioned infrastructure elements that depend on other areas, other regions. Do you have any specific one in mind which depend the most on collaboration outside the EU? And do you see anything changing in the upcoming years?
Yes, so I think the ones, and I'm not the expert on this, but the ones that were mentioned as those which are increasingly dependent on other regions are things like computing systems and data infrastructure. Those are the most critical one.
Clearly. So the links between national roadmaps of the digital decade and the Recovery and Resilience Fund. Can you say anything about that?
Yes, indeed. This is very important, and it's actually an element I forgot to mention. Which is first, I would say we have tried or searched for as much synergy as possible within all processes. And therefore, our idea is that the State of the Union Digital Decade report will be issued in June. And June, because that is the time which allows us to make sure that it is as coherent and in synergy with the European semester process and recommendations, as well as the process of the Recovery and Resilience Fund. With regard to the national roadmaps, we had a lot of discussions with member states who were arguably very worried that this would create a lot of administrative burden for them, that it would mean yet another report on top of the ones they have to do. Of course, they are under a lot of pressure. They have been to deliver all their plans on recovery and resilience, and this continues now, although in a different phase of implementation. The idea would be to ensure that from now on, their national roadmaps will be a coherent, comprehensive roadmap of their actions, plans, investments in all the areas which are covered by the program and which do coincide for the digital, of course, with the areas which are also covered in the Recovery and Resilience Fund. So the idea is to, and this will be set out in the guidance, to rather encourage them to build on top of what they have already done, what they have prepared. And we will work not only within the House here in the Commission, but also with member states and member states themselves inside to ensure that all the different areas, departments, etc., speak to each other and then provide a single comprehensive set of information.
Understood. Maybe one last question. It's rather general and maybe even philosophical, if I can call it like that. We did talk a lot and mention a lot of policies and roadmaps, but the question from the audience is, are they moving quick enough, or are they moving as quick as the internet or as the developments that we can see that are moving so fast in society?
Yeah, well, this is a very, very good question. And that was actually already the question at the outset when deciding and reflecting of the value of setting targets. I mean, the targets have a lot of value because it creates a direction and the place we want to be in 10 years. The risk is that as soon as you have set the target is outdated. And therefore, especially in this area, it was particularly difficult to define the targets and to find the right targets. I think depending on which target we take, because we did do some projected trajectories already at the basis of our decision, and they can be seen in the staff working document. Depending on the targets, progress varies. There are targets which potentially are very realistically achievable, and others which will nevertheless be very difficult. But what is most important is also that we will have the possibility to review these targets. So there is a date. I mean, there is an established date by 2025, if I remember well, or 26. Sorry, where the Commission will be able to review the targets and potentially adjust the ambition. But also consider new targets, for example. And this is actually extremely important in an area like the one we are discussing here, where things change so rapidly that maybe today we cannot even imagine what will happen next year that will transform completely the world. So we hope that with that snapshot in a couple of years, we will be able to address and ensure the outcome, which is that Europe is up to the challenge and to the good ambitious.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlota. And indeed, very good points. We will revise these targets, and that's very good that we already have that in mind. And I think maybe to add something on top of that, we also have the set values, which are more general guidelines, which normally should not change that much. So equality, accessibility, and whatnot. These do not really change that much. And as we have them as compass, I think this will help us as well in the future. So then, speaking of actual targets, maybe we move to very concrete things in terms of sustainability with Ilias. Ilias, please, the floor is yours. Thank you again, Carlota.
Thanks for the invite. I will share the slides. One sec. I hope you can see them.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So I don't know, I assume there are also people from other DGs, not DG Connect only. So
And
I understand that majority of us in the Commission knows more about Green Deal than they know about digital. So it was a good opportunity to go and to tell what we actually do in DG Connect. At the same time, we do have to synergize with digital and green transitions. So as you know, those are the two pillars of today's Commission, the Green Deal. And you can also see that in the structure of the Vice President and the structure of the Commission itself. So now, what do we think about first when you think of green and digital? So I do my own kind of a surveys and I ask people, so what do you think? And majority, I mean, prevailing majority thinks of conflict. So when they think of green and digital, they immediately think of data centers, the energy, the pollution, the e-waste, the, you know, all the kind of negative impact of digital on environment. And rightly so. Despite of all those things that you read, there is still, in terms of climate impact, it's not the biggest category. So DG Klima still, we are not on the radar of the big ETS radars of, you know, kind of climate critical sectors. But when it comes to more of a forgotten story, it's the materials. We don't have them. We need to import them and we waste them. So we actually in Europe change our mobile phones every 2 years. If everybody could keep mobile phone 1 year longer, that would correspond to about 1 million cars lifetime emissions. So you can imagine just keeping it, anybody that, you know, just whatever you do, change them every 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, just keep them, your mobile phone 1 year longer. That's a huge impact right there. And I will come back to the material story later. So there is a work to do. So we have already 2 years ago committed to target. So what do we do in DG Connect? We have put in our digital strategy already 2.5 years ago that we will make all the data centers climate neutral in Europe, that we will actually watch the circularity, and we work on that with DG Envy and DG Grow and DG Ener. We have also put some targets on, sorry, this is a wrong slide. I wanted to come here. So we already have a target on data centers, on e-waste. We are working what to do better on telecommunication, and Carlota is actually the one that is looking at what can we do. We have promised some transparency measures. It's not so obvious, but we're working on that. And we also have to look how to improve the chips performance. Okay, how can we save energies by working on chips like that? So these are already concrete targets that we have, and we're working with all the DGs to see how we contribute to the kind of the best possible way of using digital to minimize the footprint. Now, if you come back, what people think about mostly is conflicts. What I would like to talk a little bit about to open your horizons is that the synergies have a much bigger impact if we get them right, but it's not easy. The synergies can actually save 15 to maybe even 20 if we do systemic changes of emissions. So if you look at it from climate point of view, the impact is much bigger if we can realize the potential of synergies, but we are not yet there. We are not realizing those potentials, and I give you some reasons for that. When it comes to measuring, we know with LCA methodologies, we know with the energy consumption measures, we know exactly what the negative part is. When it comes to measuring the positive, everybody's kind of lost. Everybody's doing their own homegrown calculations. And that's why we need a standard of how we measure the positive impact of technologies, digital technologies. And we are not yet there. That's why we have put together something called Green Digital Coalition. I don't know if you if you can see this. It's 35 CEOs at the moment, the biggest companies you can imagine of CEOs companies, and they actually understood that they have to work together to develop with the scientists a standard of measuring the positive impact. Otherwise, we will never be able to prove what we're doing in terms of benefits for sustainability. So we do have already calculations done on a kind of a bottom up. So we take use cases, very specific use cases, precision farming, connected mobility, smart grid application, and we calculate the negative impact. So let's say in precision farming, what is the footprint of all the IoT devices, of the drones, of the connectivity, of the software, AI software that you use? All that has negative impact. But then we also see what is the impact on the agriculture itself. How many tons of pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, better water management, better crop health? What are these benefits? And try to translate them to CO2 equivalents or other environmental measures. And then we call it the net environmental effects. We hope that we can actually give guidelines to how to deploy digital with positive net environmental effects. And that is not obvious because people are actually thinking, oh, just putting digital in home environments or in the car or in the factory, by default, it will have a positive effect, but it doesn't. It's really a very narrow band under which digital gives positive environmental effects. And those boundaries are not obvious and not easy to calculate. So that's why this is kind of the first message. Yes, there is potential for much bigger positive effect, but the rebound effects are tricky and not obvious. One example that maybe others that have heard me saying is precision farming or connected mobility, where connected mobility, that means you give people a platform where they can do mobility as a service. That means I can get a autonomous electrical car, let's say in a few years, or electrical car with the driver now, to get me from A to B, and I don't need a car because anywhere in this urban setting, I can get from A to B much faster. If somebody picks me up and gets me there, I don't need to worry about parking. I can work in the car. I don't need to worry about my own parking or where I go. I can program it. I can do ad hoc calls. So these, electric cars that never stop and take people from A to B if you compare how many people own cars that are there in the world settings, you can actually say that with 1/10, even less of number of cars in a city, I give people mobility. People don't need a car, they need a mobility. So if I give that mobility service with 1/10 of material goods and 0 emissions, this is perfect. I mean, people say this is a positive effect of digital, but look how tricky it can get. First, how are you going to ensure that people don't buy their own cars in addition? So you have the 100% of another 10% on top. How do you ensure that people don't take only those electric cars rather than public transport? Because you can't beat public transport with respect to ecological footprint. And the third, less obvious, is how do we prevent that people actually don't stick objects into these tomorrow autonomous cars and start sending to each other a bottle of wine or guitar or some kind of a box with goodies across the city? That would be a rebound effect that you cannot do today, that would kind of throw out of the window all the positive benefits, because then the number of cars will be bigger, the trajectories and congestion and all that, if people start putting objects in these things instead of transporting themselves. Precision farming is the same. Imagine giving every farmer AI, 3 drones, IoTs for their machinery, IoTs in the soil, IoTs, connected devices and meteorological stations everywhere. If you flood agricultural world with devices, I guarantee you they will not be optimally used or misused. They don't have the money, they don't have the skills. This is a one way to create e-waste of tomorrow. Rather, it should be the agricultural company turning into, instead of making money by selling pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, to become service companies, become digital or partner with digital company and provide services saying, I take care of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizer, whatever, chemical or organic, and I will just put wherever needed as needed. And they will be having economy of scale. So they do with a minimal number of gadgets, expense to them. They will use minimal number of agricultural products because it's expense to them. And suddenly you have a win-win situation. But that means revolutionary change from quantity-driven profits to service-driven profits. And that is what I just said about agriculture applies to everything in our economy. So that kind of power of digital to change from selling materials to make profits to sell services with a minimum number of materials behind that, that is the biggest possible change that we're trying to calculate also with the Green Digital Coalition. Now, just as example of what we can do is, and I will talk about Digital Product Passport later, smart mobility I just discussed. So all this is a potential that has a very specific guidelines. The potential is possible to be positive if and only if the digital solutions are designed correctly, are deployed correctly, and are governed correctly. So this is a big if. And that if is not yet really known. Just throwing digital at something may not get you the environmental and social benefits that you hope for. It can get you the economic ones. But the sustainability is 3 dimensions: economy, society, environment. And we need to, maybe for the first time in history, have a 3-dimensional world to optimize with digital tools, which is completely a new paradigm for digitization that normally partners with economic and a bit of a social dimension, but has not partnered with environmental dimension in the past. You can see that in the RRPs. I don't know how many of you deal and read what the member states are proposing for in their RRPs, resilient recovery plans. And you see that there is nothing digital in the green section, and there is not much green in the digital section. So this kind of a synergy has not yet happened in a big capacity way in member states. Those are separate ministries that write the green plans and separate ministries that write the digital, and they don't know of each other. They don't even know how to help each other. So there's almost nothing in terms of what I just described as possibilities for synergies. If I had to choose one, and the member states committed to it. So the funny thing is that in 1.5 years ago, all the ministers of digital said, yes, I commit to use digital for greening, or I used to be, to do whatever I can to green the digital. So they promised that, and then they delivered RRPs, and there was nothing. So there's still lack of understanding and capacity that we need to all collectively work on. So I'm not saying it's their fault. This is completely new kid on the block. We all need to kind of collectively start doing things using digital to green the other sectors, because tomorrow there will be only green money. Today it's already 50% of all the public finances is already earmarked for sustainable financing. EU taxonomy is going through and kind of giving some order. But if digital doesn't make it under the umbrella of sustainable finance, we will be drying out as digital infrastructure. So it's really important that we prove the case of digital, for digital to be positive force for climate and environment. And if I had to choose one single, silver bullet, say you can do one thing with digital, what would be the first and top? And that, for me, in terms of impact, is to help with digitalization, to accelerate the move to circular economy. Because one thing that people don't understand is that the non-circularity of our economy, this kind of what I called before quantity-driven profits, that more cars I'll sell, more money I make, more mobile I sell, more money I make, more fertilizers I sell, more money I make. This kind of natural resource quantities driven profits are the worst thing for climate change. 56% of industrial emissions is non-circularity of our economy. Another thing to think about is the following. Suppose we clean the industries. Suppose we make steel production clean. We put hydrogen and electric furnaces. Suppose it's zero emission, the iron. Okay, so tomorrow we say we have a clean iron production. But are we sure that we're using the iron in the correct way? How many cars are not used? How many buildings are not used? So beyond just cleaning and emission scope, there's kind of a funnel of carbon that everybody's obsessed with. But it's not only about cleaning with respect to emissions, everything. It's about natural resource use. And that is even more important for biodiversity, because we basically, the biomass and the biodiversity is, it's disappearing in front of our eyes. And I think that is as important as climate change, if not more. So that use of natural resource is something that people focus less on. They are obsessed with emissions. But actually, that's the driving force of the climate change. So you can throw penicillins on different cleaning of different industries. If you don't treat the driving cause, which is the quantity-driven profits, and natural resources not being valued, because more we destroy, more profits we make, because there is no taxing of natural resource. We tax labor, but not natural resource. So if we don't change that paradigm, I don't think we have any chance in climate change mitigation or adaptation later on. So to decouple what we call growth from use of natural resource is the ultimate paradigm where digital can help. How? Well, circular economy means that there is a lot of information being passed in the smaller and bigger circles that you see in front of you. All that means that you need to really deploy tracking, tracing, a lot of information that has to be exchanged between the actors, between the supply chain manufacturer, retailer, user and consumer back. All these circles means a lot of information. That can only be done if we do proper digitization of the whole economy. And that's the kind of a champion in that is the new regulation that we worked with, the GNR, NV, GROW, and others. And that's called, the eco-design for sustainable products. In that eco-design, we introduced that's the big package. It's kind of a mother of all legislations lately. And in that eco-design, there is information requirement. And we introduced and we worked together, us in DigiConnect, on a concept called Digital Product Passport. Digital Product Passport is something that will revolutionize the exchange of information from the supply chain to manufacturer, to retailers, to repairers, to recyclers, to refurbishers, users, and back. So this is kind of a medical record of a product, with including the materials and the footprints of the components. Now, if you think about it, there is a benefit across all user groups, and they have been captured. There is a big impact assessment of this, of the regulation that is a proposal that has been adopted on the 30th of March. I will not bore you much with that, but just to tell you that there are already 4 or 5 DGs we working on what the DPP system could look like and what kind of data per product category can be captured. But the DPP system has something that we as DG Connect care about, because it's very much cloud services, very much blockchain applications. And this is kind of a universal infrastructure that will handle each product specific product passport. So battery passport, textile passport, steel passport, electronics passport. And we're talking about 4 trillion products. Now, you can imagine that the first, when we came in the picture, we kind of blocked any idea of making centralized databases, because that's impossible. So all that has to be in a decentralized setting. So this is basically what we're working on now. That's kind of the spearhead of what digital can do for a circular economy. And I leave it here, so we have still left some question time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilas. And indeed, in terms of discussion, we do have quite a few questions and also some general comments, some of which say thank you, because we have someone, for example, from the Research Fund for Coal and Steel. And the mention is that indeed we actually need less steel for our society.
Yeah, I mean, the question, that's very good point, that people don't realize that tomorrow we are thinking of the green world, but it can be green world flooded with consumerism 4.0, 5.0, the green consumerism, but that will not do the job.
Okay, so I have more of a comment, which will then lead into a more larger discussion. Basically, now we also saw ICT as a very strong enabler in society of economic growth, but that was actually the case as well in 2010, being 40% of productivity gains in our economies. The difference was that previously this wasn't tied to words such as sustainable digital development, ICT, sustainable ICT and whatnot. Do you think that the efforts, or at least the communication right now, is more greenwashing and just adding terms next to realities, or are we actually on a good path?
I think we are in the infancy part where people just realize that they cannot greenwash. We have not yet realized the potential of the positive, but we have realized the potential of, the reality of the negative. And we have now clear idea what greenwashing means. So the era of greenwashing is over. Now the question is, how do I prove that I'm net positive? And that's why the work of the coalition and what we do to actually have science-based proofs that, before you claim anything, you go through a specific process to say, yes, I help the environment. Before, everybody could claim anything. There was nobody to disprove it, okay? And you could see telecom companies, ICT companies putting labels saying, I'm like this, I'm green like that. So there have been development lately on how they report on their own company's footprint, which, okay, that's fine, but I'm not dealing so much with that. There is a whole army of people trying to see how to standardize the carbon disclosures and reports. I'm talking about how do I prove that my digital solution has a positive impact? And that was not there. People just said it like that. Just deploy 5G in the city and the world will be a nice place. No, just throw drones and IoTs on agriculture product and the world will be a nicer place, sustainable. No. If there is no governance, design, and proper use within the boundaries, the chance is more than 50% just throwing digital at something that it will not be neither socially nor environmentally sustainable. That's a hard thing to say being in DG Connect, but this is the reality at the moment. Just throwing without any governance, design, and use guidelines, digital, you don't really get environmental benefits just like that. And that is kind of a hard thing to realize, and that has to be there, because you will see that the do no harm principle and the new green legislations will start looking hard at the cryptos and the blockchains and the 6G tomorrow. It'll have to be justified and proven that it has sustainability. That has not been done before. I mean, we had the laissez-faire because we are helping society, economy first, society second, because society dimension was very strongly proven during the COVID. 30% of Belgians would lose their job if there was no digital. It's a huge, it was a huge enabler during COVID times, the ICT, for people to continue their jobs and family livelihood not to be endangered. But there is that third dimension that we have not yet mastered, and that's the environment.
You also mentioned design on this side, and that's actually quite a good point, and it actually ties up to two other questions. One of the issues in design is that the designers themselves, be it technologies, policies, you name it, is that they imagine they are the users without actually speaking that much to users. So one of the question is, how much efforts are we actually doing or are we taking in terms of stakeholder education in the area? And when I say education, maybe also explaining clearly what's in it for me, if I can tell it like that, so that then I can take action, and then even more, I can also become an ambassador to what I'm doing.
This is the critical thing. We have to make the other DGs and their stakeholders, so DG Agri, DG Environment, DG Ener, we have to make them the owner of those applications. So they actually, let me give you one example that I learned in healthcare. I was 25 years in digitizing healthcare. If you don't give the users a metric, that's why the coalition is so important, and make them own this technology and apply a metric to say, yes, is it positive or not? So they understand the metric and they apply it themselves. They will never deploy at scale. So imagine there are three technologies in healthcare. There is a pharmaceutical technology, there is a medical devices technology, and there is the e-health technology. Pharmaceutical, they have a metric. It's called randomized clinical trial. The users, doctors, health professionals, understand that metric. They take the technology, call it a drug. They pass through this metric called randomized clinical trial, and then they decide based on that result if they give it to their patients. So when they go to a conference, a doctor speaks to a doctors and say, it passed the metrics, let's give it to our patients. When it comes to e-health, there are no metrics. And when people go to conference, it's engineer talking to doctors. You are all stupid because you don't understand how this AI system will save patients' lives and make your work better. And they go, I say, go to hell. I have no time, I don't understand, and there's no metric, you have not proven it. Don't throw at me these things. We are doing the same in the environment. We go to conferences and it's the companies and ICT solutions saying, guys, if you just deploy this in agriculture or in your factory or in this, the world will be a better place. No, we need a metrics and we need the users to use that metric to prove it for themselves, and then they will scale the deployment. You don't need to do anything. You just need to be there to make sure that you can support them. We are not there. You understand?
Clearly. And I'm also thinking, because there is also a related question on the area. On one side, we talk about the users. So let's say normal people or day-to-day users. Sometimes people don't actually know their actual needs. There's a good saying in design that you don't really notice good design, you only notice bad design, which means that basically you only notice when things go wrong. So in this paradigm shift, which we are trying to push more sustainability and good action, isn't it then, because you also spoke about metrics, isn't it then more effective to skip the end users and only speak to corporations or to large institutions that they can actually, implement real change without actually having and insist on each and one of us to do their own part?
Imagine that you have to design within a given environmental boundary and you say so much material only and so much energy only because you are targeting an area where you want to save X amount of emissions or pollution. If you want to save X amount, you already give that boundary conditions for your design. So you need to be very, very frugal in a way and very innovative because the environmental boundaries create new innovation potential. I mean, they really squeeze the innovation to another level. So they push to another level the innovation. How much recycled material I can use in all my solutions? How can I minimize the energy consumption? How can I use the wind power and the harnessing of other type of power using all this connectiveness and smartness? So it actually beefs up the innovation and the design. And the design at the moment is that I have one application that worked for space X, area X. I will just reuse it. That's fine because then you have economies of scale, but you still need to, you need to go back to see what this. You cannot avoid the users at the environment at this stage yet. That's for sure. That's for sure. I mean, we already see transversal applications that we analyze in the coalition, that there is the backbone as the technology is the same. Sometimes it's like navigation solutions or other time it's like a smart city solution based on the same backbone, but there still need to be tailored add-ons or designs to make for that special use case net effect to guarantee net effect. So difficult to answer how to avoid users, but at the moment the users are sometimes substituted by the boundary conditions of the environmental factors. Yeah.
I see.
But those solutions have to be economically and socially viable. This is the hard part with the environmental issues, because suddenly you have 3 dimensions that you need to optimize. You cannot optimize against 2 of the 2 on the expense of the other. The do no harm principle will forbid deployment of solutions that harm the environment. People don't realize that, but it's coming.
Speaking of economy, we also have a question. Do you see any good incentives for companies which are actually effective in nudging them forward into addressing sustainability issues, especially in short-term problems such as energy cost, etc.?
Yes, and the positive things should come from green public procurement. So the financing that they can get is easier now. So the finance institutions, the investors, and public purse are looking for sustainable projects. But again, we come back, to the original point. What is the proof? What is the standard under which I can measure? There are some basics that are already used by green public procurement, but by investors. They are very basic, very robust. So innovative, complex solutions will have a hard time at the moment. And we're trying with the coalition to really set up those metrics so even more complex innovations can get it. But yes, they have the advantage because the big companies are working like crazy to minimize their footprint. So they will prefer the SMEs that can give them something cleaner or that can help them to clean themselves. The public procurers already are start putting, and it has to also be good for the environment. So those that are developing solutions that can kind of, with whatever robust indicators we have now, show that they are green, will be the preferred by the procurements, public procurements and private procurements. So there is already incentive because of the green financing, and green financings will only grow. It will squeeze, and at the end, they should be cheaper than the alternatives. So greener products and greener digital services that are actually cutting emissions should actually be cheaper. They should have and people are thinking how to make them financially more viable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we spoke about the users, the companies. So then this leaves us maybe with one last question to finish everything up. We finish with a question on, let's say, ourselves, the commission, or let's say the political environment. The question is, can we give more political boundaries and conditions and policies so we can make this happen better? are there efforts needed in specific areas to make sure that we achieve our targets?
The answer is yes. There is a much more we have to do. Now, I don't know how politically correct I will be, but we do not do enough in the digital world, putting sustainability dimension in our legislative proposals, and vice versa. The green legislations, that Green Deal is like mushrooming legislation. It's like spitting out every month a legislation. The green legislations are not digitally proof for the future. They do not include all the enabling potential of digital. Give you one example. So there is the CBAM, for example, and they are still thinking about centralized databases. So the green legislation always comes back to kind of 30 years old paradigm. Give us the information and we will store it in the basement of a commission and we'll have army of database manager analyzing it. I mean, they live in the beginning of 20th century with respect to digital. All the legislation coming out from green part of our house are bad with respect to what can be done with using new digital technologies. Vice versa, our CHIPS Acts and Data Acts and this could be even better with respect and have to be beefed up with respect to sustainability dimension. So those two parts of the house have to do their homework better. The digital is not green enough and green is not digital enough. So, and that's just the beginning. I mean, as I said, our capacity and our colleagues have no clue because that's another DG, it's their problem, let them do it. So at the moment, green digital falls between two chairs and nobody owns it. The green says, Connect should do it, Connect says, the green part should do it. I mean, don't quote me, I don't know, I'm saying it live, but okay.
No, collaboration is key in any large entity. So anything which has more than 5 people in it, it starts to get a challenge in collaborating with each other and understanding our needs and making sure we reach the same place.
If I had to give one keyword to characterize what green digital is about, is a collaboration 4.0. I mean, it's completely enhanced version of collaboration that we have never experienced. Just the fact that for the Green Deal, I've seen in one room 19 DGs saying, oops, that changes, a Green Deal changes my way of working in my DG. I mean, 19, more than half were DGs themselves, otherwise DDGs and other representatives. So Green Deal was kind of a new beginning of collaboration. And another thing is that, okay, we strive for independence. Everybody wants to be as a DG independent. That's my mandate, don't touch it. But there is a higher concept that we still struggle with in the commission, and that's the interdependence. Of course, we are one commission, and when we do proposal, it's DG irrelevant, but that interdependence is still not there.
Yes, so that means at least we have, let's say, targets, as you mentioned, what we can work at. So I think that's good. I think in terms of insights for all green and all on the side of, at least on the side of digital infrastructure, we got quite a few this week. And as most discussions go, based on feedback from the public, from you at home or at the office, I think we managed to also get, let's say, a good overview of what can be done more, in which areas need our attention more on this side. So I thank you for being here. And thank you.
Welcome. There is actually a launch. I'm in the parallel launching a new report that has been done by a good bunch of researchers. It's called Digital Reset. I have sent it in the chat, but I don't know if the chat is actually seen by everybody. If you can repost it.
I made sure that it made in the chat.
If you repost that, it's actually being launched today, and it's called Digital Reset. It talks exactly about what I was talking about. We have to rethink how we use digital for sustainability.
Mm-hmm. And we also ran a poll while you were speaking based on that report. We saw that a lot of people were familiar with system innovation and resilience, circularity, but not so many with equity and sufficiency. So maybe that's something of the principle which we need to pay more attention to into explaining and clearly, or at least communicating clearer on that side.
Very good. Well,
Yes.
best weekend to all.
Indeed. Thank you, Elias, and thank you for everyone being here. We hope to see each other on our next events. I know it was a complicated week, but I think it was worth it in gaining more knowledge. I think decision making can go faster, or at least better directed, when we also have the knowledge to go with it. So thank you again for everyone being here. Thank you for the technical team, which supported us this whole week. And let's meet each other soon. Thank you and have an easy weekend ahead. Bye-bye.